Yeah, there you
Thanks, Jesse. It's nice to hear the birds and the kid sort of both calling from their trees in the background. And it sort of feels like reminded of John Tarrant telling stories of his daughter crawling into his lap during Teishos and the Teisho just sort of continuing with the Dharma. I don't know. Somehow it's everywhere. Um, I guess I want to talk a little bit about the other side of. I love what you say that home is always then the place I'm arriving. Oh, that not, I feel like that a little bit when I travel, when I think I could live here. I could live here. This is so much. This is better than where I live because this is, and usually lasts for 2 or 3 days. And then I think, nah, I kind of like where I live too. But I guess I want to talk a little bit about the other side of that, which is nowhere is home, including maybe even my own being sometimes doesn't feel like home. Something I have to get away from, or it's something I'm trying to reach. And that in some way that there's the definition of suffering, or there's a tremendous amount of suffering that comes from this isn't the right place, or these aren't the right people, or it's not the right temperature, or I'm not the right person. For somehow the world is not the right world that I'm living in. Somehow my home has been disrupted or somewhere else. And this came to mind in a very vivid way recently for me as I've been thinking about this great silence. And some way, the great silence is it's before any of those divisions have come into existence here and there. Any kind of ranking, any kind of differentiation, really, that everything somehow belongs and everything is welcome to take its place in existence, and everything is welcome to leave its place in existence, and everything just keeps moving. And then somehow ideas start entering the picture and things get tricky. And so I was listening. I met someone recently who's an incredibly smart, creative, interesting person. And I started talking with her, and she was saying to me how lonely her life has felt, how much that force has been active in her life. And the more I started talking to her, one of the things she said with incredible certainty was that she's very sure that she's a star being from somewhere out there, and that she's very limited being in a body, and that she can't wait until the moment that she can return to her real home and her real place in existence and her real capacity. And that in fact, the reality is this sort of video game, and that you're stuck and it's fixed and it's not real, and that the real life is out there. And I was listening to her, and it's easy to just think like, oh, you think you're a star being, okay. But I thought, it's so easy. Everyone has a version of that. I know a version of that in myself, which is there's a reason somehow that I feel outside of things, or lonely, or like I haven't quite had the right life, or I've done something wrong. And there's something, as I was noticing, as I was talking to her, there's this interesting consoling effect that it has on that part of the psyche, that maybe it's not my fault somehow, that maybe I'm just ended up in the wrong place or the wrong body. And that I guess the other implicit assumption is, well, then something can be done about it. If I just find the right body, the right place, the right, I don't know, outfit, the right haircut, the right something, the right way of speaking, that somehow I'll feel like my real self, or my life will make sense, or I'll be home. And I guess in some way that's kind of the self, is that there's an explanation that I can keep going. It somehow keeps me outside of whatever's here. And there can be a consolation in that, but ultimately it's quite painful because we think it's true. And then we start creating all sorts of reasons and rules and longings that prevent what I was noticing in being with this person, especially, is that the offers for real connection or intimacy that do appear in a conversation, there's already an immediate no, you don't get it. This is who I really am. You don't understand. And so there's a word that kept coming to mind as we were thinking about this territory is there are ways we keep exiling ourselves from our lives. And it can be through sort of like what Jesse said, that I think somehow I don't belong in this place. But I was noticing recently I got invited to a cocktail party. And in my mind, the people attending it, and especially as I entered the situation, these are not my kind of people, started entering. And I don't know, I could feel myself starting to just resist the situation and make reasons and make judgments. And then I sat down by the fire. I started to just, roll with it a little bit and see what happened. And a woman asked me, "Well, what do you do?" And I started kind of saying a little bit. And she said, "Oh, well, in fact, my little girl, who was 11," she said, "Come here," to the little girl, um, offers me guided meditations every night. And I started asking the little girl, "Well, how do you know when you're going to say something? How do you know where it comes from?" And she says, "Well, I just get really quiet inside and I see what would feel good for me to be here. And then I just say that to my mom. And every night they do this." And I thought, wow, I really have no idea who's here or what's happening. And whatever idea I might have or story I might have about the kind of people I'm with, I don't know. Um, and But this kind of exiling can happen not only in the exterior world, where maybe, you know, I'm not a real writer. Those are real writers, or I'm not a real artist. Those are real artists. Or I've often heard people say of this particular gathering, everyone else seems to be understanding and knowing, the kind of light or awakening or happiness or something. And I can tell they get it and I don't. And that already is a kind of exiling out of the situation or out of my own experience. And there also seems to be this kind of reciprocal relationship where, to the extent I'm willing to just inhabit really what's here, the emotion that's here, the sensation that's here, the whatever is appearing, I'm really willing to, yeah, inhabit it, not either exile it or exile myself. That home kind of appears. And almost like someone showed me an image not so long ago about how snails carry their home on their back. It's like we actually carry our home with us in every place we go when we don't cut it off. And it's funny how actually fungible reality is when we're not making rules about it. I had kind of a funny experience this week where I was having to be in New York City for a meeting, and it was my turn to lead the open temple. And I thought, well, no problem, I'll just lead it from the hotel room. But then my partner said, well, I have a call that morning also. It happens to be at the same time, and it's a very small hotel room. And I thought, well, hmm, how, immediately, well, wait, that's not fair. And how will it be quiet enough? And where will I go? And this won't be, as Jesse was saying, this will not be the right place for this kind of thing to happen. And I thought, well, hang on a second, let me just explore. And I went into this little bathroom, had a nice little marble background, and I found a little table and made myself a little cushion. I had a perfect size little, actually quite little attractive little wooden trash can. I had my little bell, and within 3 minutes flat, I had a temple. And there was something about being willing to, there's a koan that says, someone's walking with the world honored one, the Buddha, and Buddha says, this would be a nice spot to build a temple, to build a sanctuary. And his companion takes a blade of grass and puts it in the ground and says, there, the sanctuary is built. And it's that same kind of feeling that here can be a perfect place for a temple. And wherever it is, and here can be the perfect place for home, if I can somehow really inhabit it. I guess one other thing to say about that, and maybe we'll sit for a bit, is there's also a way in which one of the ways I was imagining this is almost like we have different rooms in our own being. And some of them we take up frequent residence in and and maybe don't want to leave. And others we may try to wall off or keep closed, or almost like in fairy tales where you have the forbidden room that you don't dare to go and you definitely don't want anyone else to go. And there's some way in which, at least I notice for myself, to the extent that I'm willing to have rooms open and energy flow through whatever those caverns of my being are, whether they're fears, whether they're sensations, whether they're habits, whether they're, when things are included, I actually do feel most at home because I don't have to be afraid of things jumping out at me or dragging me down to the basement somewhere, or, you know, taking my guests hostage or something. Um, I get to know the rooms in my being. And in some way, I think that makes us less afraid of what we encounter out in the world. The last interesting thing about this person I met is that to the extent that her home is elsewhere, it's also the sense that everything that's against her in the world and everything that might be able to help her is also outside of her. It's in guides and entities and downloads and intuitions. And you see, like, oh, everything is somehow, when everything feels out there, I either have to protect myself from it, which gets quite stressful, or I have to somehow um, protect it from me. And so this sense of, I don't know, walling things off or making things other, it's tough on us, I think. And when we have the doors open, things can flow. This is just a little something by, a little poem by Ikkyu. He says, as Ikkyu does not think of his body as if it were his body, he lives in the same place, whether it is town or country. It's like wherever I'm taking up residence, I'm here. Whatever might be here, I can be with, because here is actually does include that great silence at the beginning. It has a spaciousness, it has a generosity when I can lean on it and not create borders. So, yeah, there's a great koan in our miscellaneous I think we'll sit with this afternoon. It just says, taking the form of Guan Yin, find shelter for the homeless person. Taking the form of Guan Yin is the bodhisattva of great mercy who hears all the cries of the world. Find shelter for the homeless person.